You spend your days pursuing others, chasing clients, seeking approval from colleagues, desperately trying to get people's attention and respect. Every interaction feels like you're the one doing the reaching out, the following up, the convincing, while others seem to effortlessly attract opportunities and relationships that you have to fight for. I am Dale Carnegie, and I spent decades studying human nature and interpersonal dynamics, discovering the principles that transformed millions of lives through my teachings on influence and relationship building. What I learned about making people genuinely want to be around you will completely reverse your approach to relationships, turning you from the pursuer into the pursued. The same principles that made my courses legendary and my books bestsellers for generations can transform how people respond to you in every area of life. But first, like this video, subscribe for more timeless wisdom, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready for transformation. I was born on a farm in Missouri, where my father struggled to make ends meet. Those mortgage papers sitting on our kitchen table represented everything I feared about failure, the inability to influence others, to persuade them to see value in what you offered. I watched my father lose that farm because he couldn't convince the bank to extend our loan. He was a good man, an honest man, but he lacked the ability to make people want to help him. That experience shaped everything I would later discover about human nature. I realized that success wasn't just about having a good product or service. It was about understanding what moves people, what makes them want to be around you, what creates that invisible force that draws others toward your ideas and your person. My early attempts at sales were disasters. I would chase after potential customers, desperate to make them understand the value of what I was selling. I would follow up relentlessly, explain features and benefits endlessly, and wonder why they seemed to pull away the harder I tried. I was like a man trying to catch a butterfly. More aggressively I pursued, the more elusive it became. The turning point came when I started teaching public speaking at the YMCA. I noticed something fascinating. The students who improved the most weren't necessarily the most talented speakers. They were the ones who made others feel comfortable, who showed genuine interest in their classmates' progress, who created an atmosphere where people wanted to be around them. I began to study this phenomenon obsessively. I watched how certain people could walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention, not through loud behavior or showmanship, but through some magnetic quality that drew others to them. These people weren't chasing anyone, they were being chased. I started documenting patterns. I noticed that people who were constantly pursued by others shared certain characteristics. They listened more than they spoke. They remembered details about people's lives. They made others feel important and valued. Most importantly, they never seemed desperate for attention or approval. This revelation changed everything for me. Instead of developing techniques to chase people more effectively, I began developing methods to become the kind of person others naturally wanted to pursue. I discovered that the secret wasn't in the pursuit, it was in the transformation of the pursuer into someone worth pursuing. The mortgage papers that had once represented my father's failure became my inspiration. I would never again be in a position where I had to beg others to see my value. Instead, I would become so valuable, so genuinely interested in others, so skilled at making people feel important that they would naturally want to be around me. That sign-up sheet tells a story that changed my understanding of human nature forever. When I started teaching at the YMCA, I had 12 nervous students who could barely look each other in the eye. Within 6 months, I had a waiting list of nearly 200 people, and I hadn't spent a single dollar on advertising. People were literally chasing enrollment in my course. The reversal happened when I stopped trying to sell my course and started focusing entirely on what my students needed. Instead of promoting myself, I made each student feel like the most important person in the room. Instead of demonstrating my expertise, I drew out their potential. Instead of being the star, I made them the stars. I discovered what I now call the great reversal principle. The moment you stop chasing people and start attracting them, everything changes. But this isn't about playing hard to get or manipulating others. It's about a fundamental shift in your approach to relationships. Most people approach relationships like hungry beggars. They need approval, validation, attention, and they pursue these things desperately. They chase after friendships, romantic partners, business contacts, always wondering why others seem to pull away. The harder they chase, the more elusive their targets become. The reversal happens when you become genuinely interested in giving rather than getting. When I stopped asking, what can these people do for me, and started asking, what can I do for these people, magic happened. Students began recommending my course to friends. They started arriving early and staying late. They pursued deeper conversations with me. I realized that people are starving for genuine appreciation and interest. In a world where everyone is focused on themselves, the person who focuses on others becomes irresistibly attractive. When you stop competing for attention and start giving attention, you create a vacuum that naturally draws people toward you. The psychology behind this is profound. Human beings have an unconscious radar for desperation and neediness. When someone approaches us with an agenda wanting something from us, we instinctively put up defenses. But when someone approaches us with genuine interest in our well-being, our defenses melt away. I watched this transformation in my own students. The ones who learned to focus on making others feel comfortable and important became natural magnets for friendship and opportunity. They stopped chasing and started attracting, not through manipulation, but through authentic care for others. The most successful people I've studied all understand this principle instinctively. They know that the secret to being pursued is to become genuinely pursuable, not through artificial scarcity or games, but through developing the qualities that people naturally gravitate toward. This reversal requires courage, because it means giving up the illusion of control that comes with pursuing. When you're chasing someone, you feel like you're taking action. But when you're attracting, you must trust that your authentic interest in others will naturally draw them to you. Those index cards represent one of my most powerful discoveries about human nature. On each card, I recorded not just names and contact information, but personal details. Mrs. Johnson's daughter was studying medicine. Mr. Thompson was passionate about gardening. Sarah was planning a trip to Europe. These weren't sales tactics. They were the foundation of genuine relationships. I learned that there's a vast difference between showing interest and being interested. Most people show interest as a means to an end. They ask questions because they want something. But genuine interest is different. It's caring about people for their own sake, not for what they can do for you. The transformation in my relationships was immediate and dramatic. When I stopped treating people as potential opportunities and started seeing them as fascinating individuals, they began seeking me out. They would call me just to talk, invite me to events, and recommend me to their friends. I remember a businessman named Charles who initially avoided me at networking events. He could sense that I was trying to sell him something. But when I genuinely became interested in his passion for collecting antique watches, everything changed. I spent an hour listening to stories about his collection, asking thoughtful questions, and sharing his excitement about a new acquisition. Within a month, he had referred 3 major clients to me. The secret was that my interest became authentic. I wasn't pretending to care about watches to manipulate him. I genuinely became fascinated by his expertise and passion. This is the crucial distinction that most people miss. Genuine interest cannot be faked because it requires you to actually find value in others' experiences and perspectives. I developed what I call the curiosity practice. Instead of walking into social situations wondering what I could get from others, I would challenge myself to discover something genuinely interesting about each person I met. What were they passionate about? What challenges were they facing? What experiences had shaped them? This shift in focus transformed every interaction. People can feel the difference between surface-level questioning and genuine curiosity. When someone asks about your work because they're supposed to, versus when someone asks because they're truly fascinated by what you do, the energy is completely different. Genuine interest creates an emotional connection that makes people want to continue the conversation and deepen the relationship. I discovered that most people go through their days feeling invisible and unimportant. They're surrounded by others who are too focused on their own agendas to really see them. When you become the rare person who pays genuine attention to their thoughts, feelings, and experiences, you become incredibly valuable to them. The practice of genuine interest also changed me fundamentally. Instead of approaching relationships with scarcity worried about what I wasn't getting, I approached them with abundance, constantly discovering new facets of human experience through others' stories and perspectives. This isn't about becoming a people pleaser or losing yourself in others. It's about expanding your capacity to find genuine fascination in the human experience. When you develop this skill, people don't just want to be around you, they need to be around you because you make them feel truly seen and valued. Those transcripts taught me something profound about human nature. Everyone is dying to be truly heard, yet almost no one knows how to truly listen. I interviewed hundreds of successful people during my career, and I noticed something remarkable. The ones who opened up most fully, who shared their deepest insights and became lasting contacts, weren't responding to my questions, they were responding to my silence. Most people think listening means waiting for your turn to talk. They hear the words but miss the emotions, the deeper meanings, the unspoken needs beneath the surface. I discovered there are 3 levels of listening, and most people never get past the first level. Level 1 is surface listening, hearing words while planning your response. This is where most conversations die. People sense that you're not really with them, that you're mentally preparing your next comment or judgment. They feel unheard and gradually close off. Level 2 is focused listening, giving someone your complete attention and hearing not just their words, but their emotions. This is where real connection begins. When someone feels truly heard at this level, they start to reveal more of themselves. They lean in, speak more freely, and begin to see you as someone special. But level 3 is where magic happens. This is empathetic listening, where you hear not just what they're saying and feeling, but what they're not saying. You pick up on their deepest needs, fears, and desires. You understand the story behind the story. I learned this from a conversation with a wealthy industrialist who seemed to have everything. For an hour, he talked about his business successes, his properties, his achievements. But I was listening. At level 3, and I heard something else: a deep loneliness, a sense that no one saw him as anything more than his wealth. When I gently acknowledged this, tears came to his eyes. He said it was the first time in years anyone had seen the person behind the success. That man became one of my closest friends and most valuable contacts, not because I wanted something from him, but because I had given him something rare: the experience of being truly understood. Deep listening requires you to quiet your own internal noise. Most people are so busy thinking about their own experiences, their own responses, their own agendas, that they miss the gift being offered in every conversation. When someone shares something with you, they're giving you a piece of themselves. Deep listening honors that gift. I developed specific techniques for deep listening. I learned to listen with my whole body, maintaining soft eye contact, leaning slightly forward, nodding at appropriate moments. I practiced reflective listening, occasionally summarizing what I heard to show I was truly understanding. But most importantly, I learned to listen with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. The magnetic effect of deep listening is immediate and powerful. When people feel truly heard by you, they begin to crave more conversations with you. They start sharing things they've never told anyone else. They seek your advice, your presence, your understanding. You become addicted to them, not through what you say, but through how deeply you listen. In a world full of noise and distraction, the person who can offer the gift of complete attention becomes incredibly valuable. People will chase the rare individual who makes them feel truly heard and understood. Those letters revealed something extraordinary about human nature. Students wrote to me years after taking my courses, describing how learning to make others feel important had completely transformed their lives. One letter from a shy accountant named Robert particularly moved me. He wrote that after learning to genuinely appreciate his colleagues' contributions, he had been promoted 3 times and was now leading a team of 40 people who would do anything for him. I discovered that the deepest human hunger isn't for food, shelter, or even love, it's for importance. Every person you meet is silently asking, do I matter? Am I valuable? Do you see my worth? Most people go through their entire lives feeling unimportant, invisible, unappreciated. The person who can satisfy this hunger becomes irresistibly attractive. But here's the crucial distinction I learned. There's a world of difference between honest appreciation and empty flattery. Flattery is telling someone something that isn't true about them. Appreciation is recognizing something that is true but often overlooked. People can sense the difference immediately. I remember a hotel manager named Margaret who seemed impossible to connect with. She was efficient but cold, professional but distant. I watched her for weeks, looking for something genuine to appreciate. Then I noticed how she handled a difficult guest complaint with remarkable patience and creativity. When I acknowledged her skill in that moment, not her appearance or her general performance, but that specific demonstration of excellence, her entire demeanor changed. She began seeking opportunities to talk with me, asking my advice, and eventually became one of my strongest professional allies. The secret is to become a detective of human value. Everyone has something worthy of appreciation, but most people are too self-focused to notice it. When you develop the habit of looking for the best in others and acknowledging it sincerely, you become like water in the desert, desperately needed and deeply valued. I learned to appreciate not just achievements, but efforts, not just successes, but character, not just what people did, but who they were. A secretary who stayed late to help a colleague, a janitor who took pride in keeping the building spotless, a shy person who summoned courage to speak up in a meeting. These moments of recognition create bonds that last lifetimes. The magnetic effect of making others feel important is immediate. When you sincerely acknowledge someone's value, their posture changes, their energy shifts, their entire being lights up. You become associated with that feeling of importance, and they unconsciously begin seeking more interactions with you. I developed what I call the daily appreciation practice. Every day, I would make it a point to find something genuine to appreciate in at least 3 people I interacted with. Not forced compliments, but honest recognition of their efforts, character, or contributions. This practice transformed not only my relationships, but my own perspective on humanity. People who feel unimportant become defensive, withdrawn, and difficult. But people who feel genuinely valued become generous, open, and collaborative. By making others feel important, you're not just improving their day, you're unlocking their best selves and creating powerful advocates for your success. The person who masters this art never lacks for friends, opportunities, or support. People chase those who make them feel significant because significance is the rarest gift in human interaction. That address book became my secret weapon in building relationships. But it wasn't just the names. It was the system I developed for making every person feel like they mattered enough to remember. When I could greet someone by name months after meeting them, and recalled details about their family or interests. They looked at me like I had performed magic. I learned that a person's name is, to them, the sweetest and most important sound in any language. When you use someone's name correctly and naturally in conversation, something fascinating happens in their brain. Neurologists have since proven what I observed through experience. Hearing your own name triggers a pleasure response that makes the speaker instantly more likable. But most people are terrible with names because they're not really listening when introductions are made. They're thinking about what they'll say next, or they're distracted by their own nervousness. I developed a specific method for name retention that transformed my ability to connect with people. First, I would focus completely on the introduction moment. I would repeat the name back immediately. "Nice to meet you, Charles." Then I would use it naturally 2 or 3 times during our first conversation. I would associate the name with something memorable about the person, their profession, their passion, or even a visual connection to someone else I knew with the same name. But the real magic happened in my follow-up system. I would write notes about each person within hours of meeting them, not just their name and contact information, but personal details, their children's names, their hobbies, their current challenges or goals. When I encountered them again, I could reference these details naturally, making them feel truly seen and remembered. I remember meeting a banker named Thomas at a conference. During our brief conversation, he mentioned his son's baseball team making it to state championships. 6 months later, when I saw him at another event, I asked how his son's baseball season had ended. The look of surprise and pleasure on his face was immediate. From that moment, Thomas sought me out at every gathering, introduced me to his colleagues, and eventually sent significant business my way. The strategic use of names goes beyond just remembering them. It's about timing and context. Using someone's name at the beginning of a request increases compliance. Using it during moments of appreciation amplifies the emotional impact. Using it when you want someone's attention is far more effective than generic greetings. I also learned the power of names in group settings. When you can remember and use the names of everyone in a meeting or social gathering, you become the person who makes others feel included and valued. People gravitate toward those who make them feel important enough to remember. The modern world has made this skill even more valuable because people are increasingly disconnected and forgettable in digital interactions. The person who can remember names and personal details in an age of superficial connections becomes extraordinarily attractive. This isn't about manipulation, it's about genuine care made visible through attention to detail. When you remember someone's name and personal information, you're demonstrating that they mattered enough to occupy space in your memory. That demonstration of care creates powerful bonds that draw people back to you again and again. Those research notes contained hundreds of conversations I analyzed, looking for patterns in what made people open up versus shut down. After years of study, I discovered there are certain questions that act like keys to the human heart. Questions that bypass people's defenses and create instant intimacy and connection. The most powerful question I ever discovered wasn't, "What do you do?" or "Where are you from?" It was simply, "What's the most exciting thing happening in your life right now?" This question works like magic because it invites people to share what they're passionate about, what brings them joy, what they're looking forward to. Most people ask questions that lead to mundane, forgettable conversations. They ask about work, weather, or current events topics that engage the surface mind but leave the heart untouched. But when you ask about what excites someone, you're inviting them to share their dreams, their hopes, their sources of energy and enthusiasm. I watched this transformation happen countless times. A person who seemed closed off and uninteresting would suddenly light up when given permission to talk about their passion project, their upcoming vacation, their child's achievements, or their new hobby. Their entire energy would shift. and they would begin to associate that feeling of aliveness with being around me. The psychology behind this is profound. Most conversations focus on problems, complaints, or neutral topics. When you consistently direct conversations toward what energizes people, you become associated with positive emotions. People unconsciously begin to crave interactions with you because you make them feel good about their lives. I developed a series of heart-opening questions that could transform any conversation. What's bringing you the most satisfaction in your work lately? What's something you're learning that's really exciting you? What's the best part of your week been so far? These questions invite people to focus on the positive aspects of their experience. But the real secret isn't just in asking these questions. It's in how you respond to the answers. When someone shares what excites them, your response determines whether the conversation deepens or dies. I learned to respond with genuine curiosity, asking follow-up questions that showed I was truly interested in understanding their passion. I remember a conversation with a woman named Helen who initially seemed very reserved and formal. When I asked what was exciting her most lately, she hesitantly mentioned that she had started painting again after 20 years. Instead of a polite, "That's nice," I asked what had inspired her to return to painting, what style she was exploring, how it felt to hold a brush again. For the next hour, she shared stories of her artistic journey with increasing enthusiasm. From that day forward, she sought me out at every social gathering. These questions work because they satisfy a deep human need to be understood and appreciated for who we really are, not just our roles or responsibilities. When you consistently invite people to share what matters most to them, you become the person they want to talk to, the person they trust with their dreams and aspirations. The magnetic effect is immediate and lasting. People remember conversations where they felt truly heard and understood. They associate you with feeling valued and interesting, and they naturally seek more opportunities to experience that feeling in your presence. Those preparation notes reveal something crucial about what draws people to certain individuals. I would spend hours before each speech, not just organizing content, but identifying the specific aspects that genuinely excited me. I discovered that authentic enthusiasm is one of the most contagious and attractive forces in human interaction. Enthusiasm isn't about being loud or energetic. It's about having a genuine passion that lights you up from within. I learned this from watching my most successful students. The ones who became natural magnets for others weren't necessarily the most talented or attractive, but they had something special. They cared deeply about something, and that caring was visible in everything they did. I remember a student named Walter who was painfully shy and struggled with basic conversation skills. But when he talked about his work with underprivileged children, something extraordinary happened. His voice strengthened, his posture straightened, his eyes lit up. People began gravitating toward him not because of his social skills, but because of his infectious passion for helping kids. The secret of enthusiasm is that it's completely authentic. You can't fake genuine excitement about something. People have an uncanny ability to detect manufactured energy versus real passion. When you try to be enthusiastic about things you don't care about, you come across as inauthentic and people pull away. But when your enthusiasm is real, it becomes magnetic. I discovered that enthusiasm works on multiple levels. First, it makes you more interesting to be around. Passionate people are inherently more engaging because passion is energizing. When someone is genuinely excited about something, that energy transfers to others and makes them feel more alive. Second, enthusiasm demonstrates that you're a person who finds value and meaning in life. This suggests you'll be able to find value in others and bring energy to relationships. People are drawn to those who seem to extract joy and purpose from their experiences because they hope some of that vitality will rub off on them. Third, genuine enthusiasm shows authenticity. In a world full of people going through the motions, someone who is genuinely excited about their work, their relationships, or their interests stands out as refreshingly real. This authenticity makes others feel safe to be authentic themselves. I learned to cultivate enthusiasm deliberately, instead of focusing on what frustrated or bored me. I trained myself to find aspects of every situation that I could genuinely appreciate or get excited about. This wasn't about forced positivity, it was about developing the ability to see value and possibility in more places. The transformation was remarkable. As my genuine enthusiasm for helping people communicate better grew stronger, more people wanted to be around me. They sought my advice, recommended my courses, and introduced me to their friends. My enthusiasm for their success made them enthusiastic about me. But here's the crucial point. Enthusiasm must be authentic to be magnetic. People can instantly sense when someone is trying to manufacture excitement versus when they're sharing genuine passion. The difference between forced energy and authentic enthusiasm is the difference between repelling and attracting others. When you find what genuinely excites you and allow that passion to show naturally in your interactions, you become irresistibly attractive. People chase those who seem to have found something worth being passionate about. That waiting list taught me one of the most counterintuitive lessons about human attraction. The harder you are to obtain, the more people want to obtain you. When my courses were always available, enrollment was modest, but when demand exceeded capacity and people had to wait, suddenly everyone wanted in. This wasn't manipulation, it was human psychology in action. I discovered that the principle of scarcity applies to personal relationships just as powerfully as it does to products or services. When you're always available, always eager to please, always chasing after others' approval, you unconsciously communicate low value. But when you have boundaries, standards, and limited availability, you signal that you're valuable enough to be selective. This principle terrified me at first because it seemed to contradict everything I believed about being helpful and accessible to others. But I learned there's a crucial difference between being selectively available and being difficult or arrogant. Scarcity based on genuine value and self-respect attracts. Scarcity based on game-playing repels. I began to notice this pattern in my most magnetic students. The ones who became natural attractors weren't the ones who said yes to everything and everyone. They were the ones who had clear priorities, who protected their time and energy, who didn't drop everything whenever someone called. This selectivity made others value their attention more highly. A student named Patricia perfectly exemplified this principle. She was kind and helpful, but she had firm boundaries about her time. She wouldn't cancel her evening art class for casual social invitations. She wouldn't work weekends, except for true emergencies. She said no to requests that didn't align with her values or goals. As a result, when Patricia did make time for someone, they felt special and valued. People competed for her attention. The psychology behind scarcity is rooted in basic human nature. We tend to value what's rare and devalue what's abundant. When someone is always available, we unconsciously assume they don't have much else going on, that their time isn't in demand. But when someone has limited availability, we assume it's because they're valuable and in demand. I learned to apply this principle carefully and ethically. Instead of playing hard to get, I became genuinely selective about how I spent my time and with whom. I said no to opportunities that didn't align with my goals or values, not to manipulate others, but to preserve my energy for what mattered most. This authenticity made my scarcity feel natural rather than manufactured. The key is that your scarcity must be based on something real, genuine priorities, meaningful commitments, authentic standards. When you're busy pursuing worthwhile goals, when you have standards for the relationships you cultivate, when you value your own time and energy, others naturally begin to value them too. I also discovered that scarcity creates urgency. When people know you're not always available, they pay more attention when you are available. They're more present in conversations, more grateful for your time, more likely to follow through on commitments. Your limited availability makes every interaction more precious. The most attractive people I've known all understand this principle intuitively. They're not desperate for approval because they have rich, full lives. They don't chase after others because they're confident in their own value. This natural scarcity makes others pursue them rather than the reverse. Those tracking charts revealed something extraordinary about human nature that changed how I approached every relationship. Students who I believed would succeed had a success rate nearly 3 times higher than those I had doubts about. The correlation was so strong it couldn't be coincidence. My expectations were somehow influencing their outcomes. I discovered that people have an uncanny ability to sense what others expect of them, and they unconsciously rise or fall to meet those expectations. When you genuinely expect the best from someone, you communicate that belief through countless subtle signals: your tone of voice, your body language, the opportunities you offer them, the way you respond to their efforts. The most magnetic people I studied all shared this quality. They saw potential in others that others couldn't see in themselves. They looked past current limitations and saw future possibilities. This vision was so compelling that people began chasing these individuals, desperate to become the person they were seen as capable of becoming. I remember a secretary named Dorothy who worked in my building. Everyone treated her as invisible, just someone who answered phones and filed papers. But I noticed something special about her. She had an exceptional ability to remember details and connect seemingly unrelated information. I began treating her as the intelligent, capable person I saw her potential to be. I asked for her insights on problems, included her in discussions, and acknowledged her contributions publicly. The transformation was remarkable. Dorothy began carrying herself differently, speaking up in meetings, offering creative solutions. Within 2 years, she had been promoted to administrative manager and eventually became one of the most respected people in the organization. She told me later that my belief in her had awakened, something she didn't know existed. This principle works because expectation shapes behavior in both directions. When you expect someone to disappoint you, you unconsciously create conditions that make disappointment more likely. You're less patient, less encouraging, less willing to give second chances. But when you expect someone to succeed, you naturally become more supportive, more encouraging, more willing to invest in their growth. The magnetic effect of positive expectation is immediate and powerful. When people sense that you see greatness in them, they become hungry for more interactions with you. You become associated with their highest self, their potential, their best possibilities. They chase the feeling of being seen as capable and valuable. I learned to look for evidence of people's potential rather than their limitations. Instead of focusing on what they currently lacked, I trained myself to see what they could become. This shift in perception changed everything about how I interacted with others. I became someone who brought out the best in people, rather than reinforcing their limitations. The key is that your positive expectations must be genuine, not manufactured. People can sense the difference between authentic belief and empty encouragement. When you truly see someone's potential and believe in their ability to grow, that conviction is communicated through every interaction. I developed what I call potential vision, the ability to see people not just as they are, but as they could become. This skill made me incredibly attractive to others because I offered them something rare, someone who believed in their possibility for growth and greatness. Those debate club notes completely revolutionized my understanding of conflict and attraction. I had assumed that disagreement was the enemy of relationships, that to be liked I needed to agree with everyone. But watching skilled debaters, I discovered something counterintuitive. People respected and were drawn to those who could disagree, respectfully and intelligently, not those who simply nodded along with everything. The most magnetic people I observed weren't people pleasers who avoided all conflict. They were individuals who had strong convictions but could express disagreement in ways that actually strengthened relationships rather than damaging them. They understood that respectful disagreement demonstrates respect for the other person's intelligence and creates deeper, more authentic connections. I learned that there's a crucial difference between being disagreeable and being able to disagree. Disagreeable people argue to win, to prove others wrong, to dominate. But people who know how to disagree constructively engage in conflict to understand, to explore ideas, to find better solutions together. One of my most powerful relationships began with a strong disagreement. A businessman named Richard challenged one of my fundamental teaching principles during a seminar. Instead of becoming defensive or dismissive, I thanked him for raising the point and explored his perspective genuinely. We had a respectful but intense discussion that lasted nearly an hour. Rather than creating animosity, this disagreement became the foundation of a deep friendship and professional partnership that lasted decades. The key to constructive disagreement is what I call disagreeing up. Instead of trying to tear down the other person's position, you build upon it. You might say, "That's an interesting perspective, and I can see why you'd think that. I've had a different experience that leads me to a different conclusion. Let me share it and see what you think." This approach accomplishes several things simultaneously. It validates the other person's intelligence and right to their opinion. It demonstrates that you've actually listened and understood their position. It invites collaborative exploration rather than competitive argument. Most importantly, it shows that you respect them enough to engage seriously with their ideas. I discovered that people are actually attracted to those who challenge them intellectually, as long as the challenge comes from a place of respect rather than superiority. When you can disagree with someone while maintaining their dignity and demonstrating genuine interest in understanding their perspective, you become incredibly valuable to them. Most people are surrounded by either yes-men who agree with everything, or adversaries who attack everything. The person who can offer thoughtful, respectful pushback becomes a treasured advisor and friend. They provide something rare, honest feedback delivered with care and respect. I learned specific techniques for constructive disagreement. First, find something you can genuinely agree with in their position before introducing your disagreement. Second, use phrases like "I see it differently" rather than "you're wrong." Third, ask questions that help them examine their own assumptions, rather than attacking their conclusions directly. The magnetic effect of this approach is remarkable. When you can disagree with someone while making them feel respected and heard, they begin to trust your judgment and seek your input. They know you'll tell them the truth, but in a way that preserves their dignity and helps them grow. People chase those who can challenge them to think more deeply while maintaining respect for their intelligence and worth. Those volunteer records tell the story of the most counterintuitive discovery I ever made about building relationships and influence. The more I served others without expecting anything in return, the more opportunities, connections, and benefits flowed back to me. It seemed backwards, but it was one of the most reliable patterns I observed in human interaction. I started volunteering at a local community center, teaching public speaking to immigrants who wanted to improve their English. I wasn't doing it for business reasons, genuinely wanted to help people who reminded me of my own humble beginnings. But what happened as a result transformed my understanding of how relationships really work. Among those students were small business owners, skilled tradespeople, professionals starting over in a new country. As their confidence grew and their English improved, they began referring business to me, introducing me to their networks, and treating me like family. I had given them something valuable without asking for anything in return, and they became some of my most loyal advocates. The principle I discovered is that service creates obligation in the most positive way. When you genuinely help someone without expecting immediate reciprocation, you create a psychological bond that makes them want to find ways to help you in return. This isn't manipulation, it's the natural human response to genuine kindness and service. But here's the crucial element. The service must be authentic. People can sense the difference between someone helping because they care and someone helping because they want something. The magnetic power only works when your motivation is genuinely to serve, not to get. I began applying this principle strategically in my professional relationships. When I met someone new, instead of thinking, what can this person do for me, I would ask, what can I do for this person? This shift in focus completely changed the dynamic of my interactions. I remember meeting a struggling young entrepreneur named James at a networking event. Instead of trying to sell him my services, I spent time understanding his challenges and introduced him to 3 people who could help his business. I didn't ask for anything in return. 6 months later, when James's business had grown significantly, he hired me for a major project and recommended me to his entire industry network. The service before self strategy works because it demonstrates your character and builds trust in a way that no amount of salesmanship can achieve. When people see you consistently putting others' needs first, they begin to trust that you're someone who can be counted on, someone who genuinely cares about others' success. I developed what I call the contribution mindset in every interaction. I would look for ways to add value to the other person's life or work. Sometimes it was sharing information, sometimes making introductions, sometimes simply offering encouragement or recognition. The key was that I gave freely without keeping score. This approach made me incredibly attractive to others because I was solving their problems instead of creating new ones. In a world where most people are trying to get something from you, the person who consistently gives becomes extraordinarily valuable. The magnetic effect compounds over time. As you build a reputation for service and generosity, people begin seeking you out, not just for what you can give them, but because they want to be around someone who makes them feel generous and valuable themselves. People chase those who make them better versions of themselves through service and genuine care. That journal revealed one of the most overlooked secrets of magnetic personality. Consistency beats charisma every time. While flashy, unpredictable people might capture attention temporarily, it was the consistently reliable individuals who built lasting influence and attracted deep loyalty from others. I discovered this principle by tracking my own behavior and its effects on my relationships. On days when I was moody, inconsistent, or unpredictable, people kept their distance. But when I maintained consistent warmth, reliability, and character regardless of my circumstances, people were drawn to me like a magnet. They knew what to expect, and that predictability created psychological safety. The most magnetic person I ever studied was a man named Franklin who ran a small hardware store. He wasn't particularly charming or dynamic, but he had something more powerful: absolute consistency. He greeted every customer the same way, remembered personal details about their lives, and always followed through on his promises. His customers became fiercely loyal, driving past larger stores to do business with him. Consistency creates trust, and trust is the foundation of all attraction. When people can count on you to be the same person regardless of circumstances, when your kindness, integrity, and reliability are constants rather than variables, they begin to see you as a safe harbor in an unpredictable world. I learned to cultivate consistency in small daily practices. Every morning, I would review my intentions for how I wanted to show up that day. I committed to treating every person with the same respect and interest, whether they were influential or unknown. I made sure my mood and circumstances didn't dictate how I treated others. The psychological impact of consistency is profound. Most people are inconsistent kind when they feel like it, reliable when it's convenient, interested when they're in the mood. This inconsistency creates anxiety in relationships because others never know which version of you they'll encounter. But when you're consistently positive, reliable, and genuine, people relax around you. I remember a colleague named Elizabeth who exemplified this principle perfectly. Whether she was having a great day or facing serious challenges, she always greeted people warmly, listened attentively, and followed through on commitments. People began seeking her out during difficult times because they knew she would be steady and supportive. Her consistency made her indispensable. Consistency also builds compound interest in relationships. Each reliable interaction deposits trust in your relationship account. Over time, these deposits create a reservoir of goodwill that makes people want to be around you, work with you, and recommend you to others. I developed what I call character consistency, aligning my actions with my values regardless of external pressures or moods. This meant being equally respectful to the janitor and the CEO, equally helpful whether I was busy or free, equally honest whether it was convenient or costly. The magnetic power of consistency lies in its rarity. In a world of moody, unpredictable people, the individual who maintains steady character becomes extraordinarily attractive. People chase consistency because it represents security, reliability, and peace of mind. But consistency doesn't mean being boring or inflexible. It means having core principles and character traits that others can count on, even as you grow and adapt. It's about being dependably yourself, not rigidly unchanging. The most successful people I've known all understand that consistency is a choice, not a personality trait. They've learned to manage their moods and circumstances so their treatment of others remains constant. That library represented more than just accumulated knowledge. It was evidence of something that made me irresistibly attractive to others, an insatiable curiosity about becoming better. I discovered that people are magnetically drawn to those who are constantly growing, learning, and evolving, because growth is contagious and inspiring. The most magnetic individuals I studied all shared one characteristic. They never considered themselves finished products. They approached life with what I came to understand as a growth mindset, the belief that abilities, intelligence, and character could be developed through effort and learning. This mindset made them incredibly attractive because they brought fresh insights and energy to every interaction. I remember a businessman named Arthur who wasn't the smartest person in his industry when he started, but he was the most committed to learning. Every conversation with him revealed new books he'd read, new skills he was developing, new perspectives he'd gained. People sought him out not just for his current knowledge, but because they knew he would always have something new and valuable to share. The psychological appeal of growth-minded people is powerful. They represent possibility and potential. When you're around someone who is constantly improving themselves, you can't help but be inspired to grow as well. They make you believe that you too can become better, smarter, more capable. I made continuous learning a cornerstone of my daily practice. I read voraciously, not just in my field, but across disciplines. I sought out people who knew things I didn't. I attended lectures, workshops, and seminars. I asked questions constantly, always looking for new insights and perspectives. This commitment to growth had an unexpected effect on my relationships. People began seeing me as someone who could help them grow too. They brought me their challenges, knowing I would approach them with fresh thinking. They introduced me to opportunities, confident that I would make the most of them. They invested in my success because my growth benefited them to dot. Growth-minded people are attractive because they're never boring. There's always something new to discover about them, some fresh insight they've gained, some new skill they're developing. Relationships with them stay dynamic and engaging because they're constantly bringing new value to the interaction. I learned to share my learning journey openly with others. When I read something interesting, I would discuss it with colleagues. When I learned a new technique, I would teach it to my students. When I gained an insight, I would share it with friends. This sharing made my growth visible and valuable. To others, the compound effect of continuous growth is remarkable. Each new skill, insight, or capability makes you more valuable to others. Your expanded knowledge allows you to contribute more meaningfully to conversations and problem solving. Your evolved perspective helps others see their own situations more clearly. I developed what I call learning leadership, the practice of modeling curiosity and growth for others. Instead of pretending to know everything, I openly shared what I was learning, the mistakes I was making, the experiments I was trying. This vulnerability around learning made others feel safe to grow and change themselves. People chase those who are growing because growth represents hope, possibility, and future potential. In a world where many people become stagnant and predictable, the person who is constantly evolving becomes extraordinarily attractive and valuable. The growth mindset advantage isn't just about personal development, it's about becoming someone others want to be around, because you help them see what's possible in their own lives. That failure journal was one of my most closely guarded secrets. For years, until I discovered something revolutionary, sharing my authentic struggles and imperfections made me more attractive to others, not less. The pages documented every mistake I'd made, every failure I'd experienced, every moment of doubt and weakness. When I finally learned to share these vulnerabilities appropriately, I became magnetic in ways I never expected. I had spent years trying to project an image of competence and success, believing that people would only be drawn to those who seemed to have it all figured out. But the first discovered the opposite was true. People are actually repelled by perfection and attracted to authentic humanity. When you can admit your mistakes, acknowledge your weaknesses, and share your struggles honestly, you create a connection that polished facades can never achieve. The breakthrough came during a speaking engagement where I was supposed to inspire a group of struggling salespeople. Instead of giving them another motivational speech about success principles, I decided to share some of my own failures. I told them about the time I lost a major client because of my arrogance. I described my early struggles with public speaking, when I would shake so badly I could barely hold my notes. The response was electric. Instead of losing credibility, I gained it. The audience leaned in, connected with my stories, and began sharing their own challenges openly. That vulnerability created a bond that lasted for years. Many of those salespeople became lifelong friends and advocates because I had shown them that success doesn't require perfection. I learned that authenticity works because it satisfies several deep human needs simultaneously. First, it makes others feel safe to be imperfect themselves. When you acknowledge your flaws, you give others permission to be human. Second, it demonstrates courage. It takes strength to be vulnerable. Third, it shows wisdom. Only truly confident people can admit their weaknesses. But there's an art to authentic vulnerability. I discovered that timing, context, and purpose matter enormously. Sharing struggles to connect and inspire is magnetic. Sharing struggles to seek pity or avoid responsibility is repelling. The key is vulnerable strength, acknowledging imperfections while demonstrating growth and resilience. I remember a conversation with a successful executive named Robert who seemed to have everything: wealth, status, recognition. But when he shared his struggle with feeling like an imposter, worried that people would discover he wasn't as competent as they believed, something profound shifted in our relationship. His authenticity made him human and relatable instead of distant and intimidating. Authenticity creates attraction because it's so rare in a world of carefully curated images and superficial interactions. Most people present edited versions of themselves, highlighting successes and hiding struggles. The person who can be genuinely themselves flaws and all stands out as refreshingly real. I developed what I call strategic vulnerability, the skill of sharing authentic experiences in ways that build connection rather than create discomfort. This means being honest about struggles while focusing on growth, acknowledging weaknesses while demonstrating effort to improve, sharing failures while highlighting lessons learned. The magnetic power of authenticity compounds over time. When people know they're getting the real you, not a performance or facade, they develop deeper trust and connection. They begin sharing their own authentic selves in return, creating relationships of genuine depth and mutual support. People chase authenticity because it represents something precious, the opportunity to drop their own masks and be real themselves. That curriculum represented the culmination of decades of study, experimentation, and refinement. It wasn't just a collection of techniques. It was a comprehensive system for becoming the kind of person others naturally want to pursue. Looking at those pages now, I can see how all the principles I discovered work together to create an irresistible, magnetic personality. The foundation of making people chase you isn't about manipulation or games. It's about becoming genuinely attractive through the development of character traits that people universally value. When you combine genuine interest in others with deep listening skills, when you merge authentic enthusiasm with strategic scarcity, when you blend positive expectations with consistent reliability, you create a powerful force of attraction. I learned that these principles must be implemented as an integrated whole, not as isolated techniques. Trying to use just one or two creates an incomplete effect that people can sense as artificial. But when you embody all of them naturally, they create a synergistic effect that makes you irresistibly magnetic. The daily practice I developed involves what I call the morning intention setting. Each day, I would remind myself of the person I wanted to be in my interactions. I would commit to showing genuine interest in others, to listening deeply, to making people feel important, to maintaining my enthusiasm and authenticity. This wasn't about putting on a performance, it was about choosing to bring my best self to every interaction. I've discovered that different people require different combinations of these principles. Some people need to feel heard more than appreciated. Others crave intellectual challenge more than emotional support. The most magnetic individuals learn to read these needs and adapt their approach accordingly, while maintaining their authentic core. The troubleshooting guide I developed addresses common challenges. When someone seems resistant to connection, the solution is usually more genuine interest and deeper listening. When someone takes advantage of your kindness, the answer is healthier boundaries and selective availability. When relationships become stagnant, fresh enthusiasm and continued growth usually revive them. But perhaps the most important discovery was this: these principles work because they help you become a better person, not just a more attractive one. When you genuinely care about others, listen deeply, show authentic enthusiasm, maintain consistency, and continue growing, you don't just attract more people, you attract better people and create more meaningful relationships. The compound effect of this approach is remarkable. As you consistently apply these principles, your reputation begins to precede you. People start seeking you out before you've even met them, based on recommendations from others who've experienced your magnetic presence. You become known as someone worth knowing, someone who adds value to others' lives. I learned to measure success not by how many people were pursuing me, but by the quality of connections I was creating. The goal isn't to be popular, it's to be valuable. It's to become someone who genuinely enriches others' lives through your presence and interaction. The sustainable practice requires balance. You must maintain your own growth and well-being while serving others. You must have boundaries while being accessible. You must be authentic while being your best self. This balance is what separates magnetic personalities from people pleasers who burn out. The ultimate secret is that when you focus on becoming genuinely valuable to others, the pursuit becomes natural and effortless. People don't chase you because you're playing hard to get. They chase you because being around you makes their lives better. That final letter contained the most important lesson I ever learned about making people chase you. With great attraction comes great responsibility. When you master these principles and become someone others naturally pursue, you hold tremendous power to influence lives, shape destinies, and impact the world. How you use that power determines not just your success, but your legacy. I've watched students apply these principles and transform their lives in remarkable ways. Shy individuals became confident leaders. Struggling salespeople became top performers. Lonely people built rich networks of meaningful relationships. But I've also seen people misuse these abilities, manipulating others for selfish gain, or building shallow connections based on personal benefit rather than mutual value. The difference lies in intention. When you use these principles to genuinely serve others, to help them feel valued and important, to contribute to their growth and success, you create a positive ripple effect that extends far beyond your immediate circle. But when you use them solely for personal advantage, you may achieve short-term gains while ultimately damaging your relationships and reputation. I learned that true magnetic power comes not from getting people to chase you, but from becoming someone worth chasing. This means developing character alongside charisma, building substance alongside attraction, cultivating wisdom alongside influence. The most powerfully magnetic people I've known were those who used their abilities to lift others up rather than advance themselves at others' expense. The responsibility of influence means recognizing that your interactions shape other people's self-perception and future choices. When you make someone feel important and valued, you may be giving them the confidence to pursue dreams they've been afraid to chase. When you listen deeply to someone's struggles, you may be providing the understanding they need to overcome challenges. When you believe in someone's potential, you may be the catalyst for their transformation. I think of the thousands of students who passed through my courses, and I'm humbled by the letters I received over the years describing how our interactions changed their lives. A shy woman who became a successful speaker, a failed businessman who built a thriving company, a lonely man who found love and built a family. These transformations happened not because of my techniques, but because of how I chose to use my influence. The legacy you leave isn't measured by how many people pursued you, but by how many lives you improved through your interactions. It's not about being the center of attention, but about being a source of positive influence that helps others become their best selves. As you apply these principles in your own life, remember that every conversation is an opportunity to impact someone's day, every interaction a chance to influence someone's future. Use your growing magnetic power wisely, generously, and with genuine care for others' well-being. The ultimate irony of making people chase you is this: the more you focus on serving others rather than attracting them, the more attractive you become. The more you use your influence to benefit others rather than yourself, the more influence you gain. The more you make others feel important and valued, the more important and valuable you become to them. My wish for you is that you'll use these principles not just to build a life of attraction and influence, but to create a legacy of positive impact that extends far beyond your own success. Make people chase you not for your own gratification, but so you can lead them toward their own greatness. The world needs more people who understand the power of human connection and use it wisely. Be one of them.